Welcome back in, everybody, to the Wraparound. And this is a really, really cool episode because if you had told me when I was, like knee-high to a grasshopper, talking like church kid Brad back in the day, that becoming a home inspector would lead to sitting down with a member of the Newsboys, I wouldn't have believed you. But this is just how it works out. This is cool. So welcome, Mr. Jeff Frankenstein, keyboardist, bassist for the Newsboys. I think I got both of those right.
Yeah, relatively, yeah.
Yeah, synth bass, anyway. Anyway, so well, welcome to the show, dude.
Thank you very much.
So he is a home inspector. Newsboys, for those that don't know, I'm not going to assume that everybody grew up privileged as I did with, listening to one of the coolest bands in Christian rock singing about Captain Crunch and such as that, and In the Belly of the Whale with the Veggie Tales. But if you aren't familiar with any of that, the Newsboys, you guys have been around for how long?
So coming up here in a couple of weeks will be my 30th year in the band, which is
30 years, dude.
Really insane. Yeah, I mean, thousands of shows.
Yeah.
We've been to over 50 countries. We were just in Germany last week.
Right.
Just had 4 Grammy nominations. Just really had a nice, long, awesome career, doing all kinds of great things all around the world.
Dude,
it's been fun.
I can't even imagine, man. But yeah, so you've gone from, like you said, 4 Grammy nominations to being a home inspector. So for those wondering, like, why are you talking to a CCM guy about home inspections? Well, he is a home inspector now.
Yeah, it was cool that you reached out to me on Instagram. You found me out of the blue, and I was like, no way. So this is
the power of social media.
It really is. Yeah.
I mean, I think Michael Tate, lead singer of the band, he had posted something, tagged you in it, and I clicked on yours and it said home inspector, and I went, yes, he is, man.
Yeah.
So let's just jump right into that, dude. How did you go from what we're on the road doing right now? You're in Tampa, getting ready to put on a show tonight.
Mm-hmm.
But how did you go from 30 years in doing this to becoming a home inspector?
Yeah, well, it was kind of something that has always intrigued me. So we're all based in Nashville, and I moved there from Detroit in 1994. And so Nashville back then was a very sleepy town. There wasn't much going on. And so we were all the band was kind of new to the area, and we're buying homes. And so like when I was in my 20s, back in like the late 90s, I bought my first house, and our guitarist and I bought houses right next to each other in this neighborhood called Sylvan Park. And it was like, we were like the first younger people that were moving into this place. And we were touring like crazy back then. And so I was on the road. We were on this big, long tour, and I was engaged. And so my wife was at the inspection of this house that we were getting ready to buy. And she called me up after the inspection was done, and she was just in tears on the phone. And so the inspection had happened, and the guy had just completely scared my wife to death, condemned the house. And it was a 1940s house. We knew that it was old. It had the same person that had lived in it the entire time. So we knew it was going to need to be rehabbed, but it was this report
You didn't know how much, yeah.
No, it was crazy. So I'm on the road for like a 3-month tour, and I was like, I get back, and I'm like, we're buying this house anyway. That kind of thing. And so we did. And, as we renovated the place, we realized that, man, if we got spooked on this one, and so I just thought that was really interesting, and my wife was upset about it, but we ended up selling the house a year later for double, and it doesn't exist anymore. It was demolished a few years ago, typical Nashville or whatever. So had a really bad experience at that time. And then when we moved on from that house, we moved to an 1890s like historical house a few blocks away. And this time, I had a really great experience with an inspector who came in right before closing. And so obviously a house like that is going to have all kinds of crazy stuff going on in it. But we felt kind of prepared after what we had been through with the other older place. But this place had like active knob and tube in the attic that was like completely surrounded by shredded newspaper that they were using for insulation.
Right.
It had all the crazy.
It wasn't
old
even
house
vermiculite.
stuff.
Like it was.
No.
Okay.
And so this guy, he found all kinds of great finds and told the realtor. Of course, I was on the road at the time, but the realtor did due diligence and said, I can't let you buy this house with all these things wrong with it. So that were safety things too. So it was cool. So I was like, okay, so there's a bad experience, there's a good experience. And I was always very interested in houses and how they worked. I mean, my wife always makes fun of me because I'm constantly staring at things all the time,
Well, you said you had 4 kids, so this proves you're a dad, right? Like you can't walk into the house and not just be like, I think I could make this better,
Yeah. So fast forward to 2020, we're on the road and it's like March 2020 and we had just started a tour and sure enough, the old COVID news starts coming out. And so like we were in like Ohio somewhere, we were about to take the stage and do a show and the governor shuts down everything. Show gets canceled. We get back in the bus. We go to Virginia where the next show was. Same thing happens again. And then we do another show. So all weekend, our show's just getting canceled and we're like getting the news and 2 weeks to slow the spread. And all of us are thinking, this is going to be bad for people that tour. And like of anybody who had a job, we were the first people to lose ours basically.
Right.
So I went from being on the road for 25 straight years at that point to nothing.
Okay.
And I was just home for the first time for like a year straight with nowhere to go, nothing to do. And I had another small business that like designed LED content for tours, like you'll see at our show tonight.
Nice.
And so obviously with touring, all the crew guys, all the band guys, everybody was just shut down completely. And it was, and we were the first guys to get shut down and the last guys to come back, really, the music industry, entertainment. So with
unless you're in Florida, they didn't shut down at all. Yeah.
Tennessee was actually not too bad. By about May of 21, everyone was done with it and life kind of. But if you're touring and it's like, well, I guess we're never going to play California ever again. We barely have since, So I was like, well, I've got all this time on my hands and like, what could I do? And so I was like, I'm just going to do it. I'm going to go through the process and go through the licensing, all the education, because I was very interested in it. And I felt like I had a really good head start because so many of my colleagues, musicians that I had toured with for so many years, it's a very similar path. They a lot of them, when they leave the road, they go into real estate and become really successful real estate agents. So I was like, this is great. I've already got a lot of the contacts in that industry, a lot of people I know, which, that's one of the hardest parts about, as starting a new business is that first year where you're like starting from scratch.
Yeah.
So I'm like, I'm just going to go for it. And if it's something I do regularly, cool. But if not, I'll just take that and I'll take my license and put it in my pocket for later. And who knows? Well, long story short, opened a business. And so I've been doing inspections for the last year or so. And it's been actually really enjoyable. It's completely outside of what I've known, but I really enjoy, just being able to help people, make some of the biggest decisions they ever have to make.
Dude, that's where it's really at too.
Totally.
And I can totally see how it would be almost a respite from the rigors of like tour life. Because you're around people all day, every day. It's constant. And you get to home inspection, you're dealing with one person, like one home buyer, one realtor. You kind of get in this process and this flow where it's taking your mind off of what you do, on your daily basis for your day job in a sense.
Yeah.
And it switches it up, but it keeps it fun.
It very much so. I mean, it's kind of like touring in a lot of ways because in touring, you're in a different city every day. The environment is different. You're dealing with a different group of people.
Right.
The situations are different, and so home inspection is very much like that.
Right.
You have a different agent. You have a different client. The conditions are different. The house is different. You're in a different location every day, and you're trying to figure out, like just like touring, how do you show up in a place, deliver, and do that all in one day, and move on to the next place. And so it's cool. And like you've got to be like, as being an inspector yourself, you've got to be quick on your feet. You've got to like put yourself in your client's shoes, and say, hey, if I was this person, how can I serve them? But you don't even really know them.
Right.
So it's interesting. Yeah.
No, it's fascinating. And I expecting around Nashville too, because there's so much history there. Like I've gotten to see just nooks and crannies of different parts of it.
Yeah.
So everything from some of the historical homes in 12 South, all the way up to the up and coming areas around like East Nashville and stuff.
Oh yeah.
I cannot imagine some of the stuff you run into over there.
Yeah, I'm kind of fortunate because I've lived in a few different areas of town and different varieties of places, from like 90s condos. Like right now, the house I live in was like a 94 subdivision house, but I've lived in older houses too, and I know all the parts of town. And then like in Nashville, it was already a very fast growing city before COVID, and that just was like added more fuel to the fire of what already was, I mean, back in the 90s, if you told somebody you lived in Nashville, they would be like, why? And like now, if you tell somebody you live in Nashville, they're like, I can't wait to go visit.
Right.
And they usually come to visit, and then they're like, I want to move there, So,
and they say the one thing that I'm sure you hate hearing, which is let's go to Broadway, right? Like, you're like, no.
Oh, it's part of it. Not many locals hang out on Broadway ever.
Right.
But it wouldn't be the first place I'd recommend to visit. But it has its own thing too. But there's such a wide variety of houses, and a lot of really old, beautiful houses, and just big neighborhoods full of old houses. So
yeah, man.
Those are, I have a place in my heart for old houses. I feel like when I finally moved out of my 1890s one, it wasn't even like I was selling it. I felt like I was just like handing it off to the next person to enjoy.
Right,
It was so cool.
But you said it got leveled though, right?
So my 1940s got leveled.
Okay, the 1890s is still around.
And so I had, like, the 1940s got leveled. I didn't know it did. And now that I have 4 kids, I was like, oh, do you want to see where mom and dad lived when they got married?
Right.
So I didn't even know it was gone. I was in the old neighborhood with my 14-year-old. And I'd come around the corner, and I was like, and it was gone. And this is very common in Nashville. If there is a tract of land with a house that's not very nice looking, they will mow it down in no time.
Just build a McMansion
fill
on it.
the entire property with house. You will not have a yard anymore.
No, they're much more narrow lots, right?
Narrow lots, and like lots of tall skinnies going up everywhere. In fact, I just did one last week. I showed up to do an inspection in the morning, and the house was nowhere near done. And I don't think that the buyer knew it. And there was about 12 workers still furiously working, and they were supposed to close in a week.
Jeez.
And so, that was another one of those rare circumstances where you just do the best you can. I had to work around a lot of people and that kind of thing. But so it's the new construction as well is going crazy there too.
Right. So honestly, looking at both, since you've had the opportunity to do both there, do you find that a lot of the restoration work on some of the older houses is better than like the tall skinnies that are getting put up? Or
the challenge is, as you know, is it's like if I go into a house that was built like in the 80s or any other era, you can see clues of what's been going on for years, But if I go into a new construction, you almost have to predict what could happen in the future a little bit more than you would with an older place.
Yeah.
And so it puts you in a little bit of a weird spot. But I have been to a lot of new construction that was not impressive at all. And I was like, I cannot believe this. And I've been to some that was really nice that I'd be like, I would love to live here. So it's hard. But I do feel like it is a great role that we can serve as inspectors, is to because there's a lot of stuff that's going up really fast, and there's no way that all of it can be quality controlled the way it needs to be. No,
definitely not. And I guess it's expanding so quickly there too. So from everything that I've been seeing, as far as like going down towards Franklin area, just because you can only do so much with the land that's already available, like downtown and central. So you have to start building out.
Yeah, so I think it's Nashville's actually, people come down and visit, and they're like, it's just not really as big as I thought it was. It's not a big city, but I think it's kind of the way that the way that it's kind of laid out, it will be kind of like Atlanta in another few years. Kind of feels like that's the trend, which is great for y'all's loss. It's great for inspectors though, because I think we'll have a lot of work for many years to come, with the growth.
Well, that's kind of the beauty of it. It's like even when you're ready to like transition out of music life, you've got something that it's not going to be outsourced. You can keep that license forever. I mean, wherever you guys, if you decide you want to stay in Nashville, if you decide you want to move, it's something that you can do no matter where you go. So,
yeah. And I love it, man. There's nothing better than getting in the truck in the morning and a cup of coffee. And like you said, I did an inspection a couple of weeks ago out in Portland, Tennessee, which is way north. And It was funny. That was a funny one because I had a very well-known realtor who had referred me, and I was kind of like, ooh, I was kind of like, this is great, cool.
Yeah.
Wow, I was kind of like almost nervous. I was like, I want to do a really good job for this guy,
Sure, yeah.
And so I was talking to him on the phone, and I said, well, who's the client today? And he said, well, it's a retired Air Force captain. I'm like, oh boy. I'm like, and he's
Nice.
going to be there the whole time. And I'm like, and his wife. And I'm like, okay.
I'd be more worried about the wife, probably. Like,
So I was like,
military wives are no joke.
Yeah. So I was like, this guy could be really tough to please.
Yeah.
So I drive up to the inspection, and I get there, and it was like so like the stereotype. He had the veteran gear on, and was asking me, giving me the look, and trying to suss me out, and I'm like, oh no. And so I, but you what we do, you just get right to work, and so as we kind of had little chats throughout the inspection, talking about life and a little bit of our background. Turned out to be like the coolest guy ever, and his wife
awesome, dude.
started asking me about like how I got into this and music, and I mentioned Newsboys, and she comes back 15 minutes later and is like, she was actually from the Philippines, and we had just played there and done some shows, and she was like, Newsboys, she's like, you're one of my favorite bands, and like, so by the end of the inspection, I had made like 2 really good friends and felt like I had to help them, and we texted afterwards and that kind of stuff. So it was cool.
No, I love that, and I love that they trusted your insight. You must have done a great job communicating like your know-how about the job, because for me, like, when people ask me, so what did you do before this? Especially when they've got that skeptical look.
Yeah.
What they're wanting to hear is, I was in construction, or I was a framing specialist, or I was an electrician, right? Something where it was a trade.
Yeah.
And when they heard me go, I was a youth pastor, they're like, what? So you don't know Jack. And I'm like, that's not true. No, I had to pay my bills somehow, So like, what have you had to do, or have you had to kind of not necessarily compensate, but go the extra yard in communicating when people look at the juxtaposition of what you came from and what you're doing?
Yeah,
Has that been a hurdle at all, or?
A little bit. I think what you said is right. I think it's trust.
Yeah.
That's what it really boils down to. It's trust and empathy, and like, does this person really think that you're going to go the extra mile for them on the day of your inspection, or are you just treating this like it's just another job?
Right.
And that's a big thing. And I know from like 30 years of being on the road and doing shows, it's like, you can't treat, touring and these shows like another job.
No.
Because being in a band and making records and music, you're applying for your job every time you make a new record, every time you put out a new show or a new tour. And if it's not good, people say, well, it's not good as what it used to be, and then, whatever.
Right.
So that's what I try to apply to inspections. Like, how can I instill trust? And like, anybody who's been in a profession for a long time, like 30 years is a long time. So when you hear someone's been doing something for 30 years, like, okay, well, they're not flaky. They've, or whatever. So
you've been doing this since I was 6, okay?
But and then the other thing, it depends on the client, because everyone has a different view of what they think a home inspector is, and what they think you are could be something totally you're not. And so the way I try to explain it to clients that makes a lot of sense to them is like, we are generalists, and we don't know every single thing about everything.
Right.
And a good analogy I try to explain to some clients sometimes is like, we're like almost like general practice doctors.
It's exactly
you wouldn't go to your general walk-in clinic and get a brain surgery, but the guy at the doctor at the walk-in clinic could refer you to the right people to help you get help. So like, I try to explain to clients that we are trained in a different way from contractors. We're actually trained to identify defects and problems. And that's, so we're looking for different things,
Right.
And that tends to resonate with clients. They understand that when it's explained in that way.
Yeah, that's good. So that's actually, you hit on something that I wanted to talk to you about, which there's some industry crossover in the sense of just good business practice, right? And where you might not think that one industry might have something that applies to the other, it does. We actually just had somebody from when Porch did their inspection fuel conference. We had somebody from Disney do a presentation on basically understanding clients.
Yeah.
And so it's like you would initially go, what does Disney have to do with home inspections? But there's still good nuggets to take away.
Absolutely.
So on that, you've owned your own business outside of music with your LED production stuff.
Yeah.
In looking at home inspections, even though you're on, I guess year 3 of doing this now in a sense, what have you learned business-wise in terms of reinventing yourself to stay fresh, to stay top of mind, to keep that level of excellence while also pushing yourself forward in an industry? What have you learned in that, in your background that would apply to home inspections?
So I've been kind of fortunate because I'm a part-timer. So I think in a lot of ways, I'm not feeling the pressure that a lot of other inspectors are that are really trying to forge into this full time. And they're like, how can I be full time as fast as I can? And so I feel, fortunate in that way, because I may go out on tour like we are now for 3 months, and I'm a musician for 3 months, and then I might be home for 2 or 3 months, and I'm an inspector for those times, or whatever, whatever comes my way. But I do think like the main thing in the short time I've been at it, that I've noticed it really is personal relationships with people.
That's cool, man.
And I'll be the first to admit I'm an introvert at heart, and it's one of the hardest parts of the job for me is just making connections with other people, because it's not my forte. You can put me in an editing suite, or you can put me behind a laptop. I'll create all kinds of stuff for you. So, and that's we all are that way. We all have strengths and weaknesses of our job. But like for me, it was just like I was fortunate because I already know a ton of agents in Tennessee, because so many of my colleagues have gone into real estate from touring. And so for me, it was just like calling everybody and say, hey, I decided to do this. And most of the response I've gotten is like, no way. Like, that's great, but it's a lot of lunches, coffees. And, even if I'm driving with my kids and I see an open house somewhere, we'll pull in, stop in, say hello, and I can't tell you how many great experiences I've had just that way. Some of my best agents that I know in Nashville, I've met that way, and some knew the band, some knew Newsboys or whatever, but just dropping in, and they just being polite, having good manners. I mean, I feel like in today's world, sometimes it doesn't take much.
No, it doesn't.
Just that simple text back to people, just being appreciative, because we're always on to the next thing. Nobody stops to look back, in our culture now. So taking an extra second to write a text to somebody and say, I really appreciate you. Thank you so much. And just being genuine goes so far.
No, that's awesome. And honestly, like you said, it doesn't take a whole lot to kind of separate yourself apart. When realtors already had an inspector that they used, I would always just tell them, hey, look, if I could just answer a question about a house, if you have one,
100%.
Even if I didn't inspect it, just give me a call. I still have realtors in Virginia texting me in Florida. Like, hey, this other guy pulled this up. Is this serious or not? Or,
Same for me. I always say, if you ever get into a situation and you need a question, text me anything. I'm happy to help you. If you have a head scratcher, you need a second opinion, and they do. And if I don't know the answer, I'll sure go look. You
got all the resources.
Absolutely.
So that's awesome, man. So I had a buddy of mine say, you know what, you should ask him this, as he's a musician and a home inspector. And I had never thought to even ask anything remotely this way, but we've got musicians that are also home inspectors, case in point. So my buddy's question was, when it comes to setting up like a home studio in a basement, what are you optimally looking for material-wise? Like, are there certain foundation types that are more acoustically preferable, certain insulations like spray foam, closed cell versus
that's an interesting
fiberglass?
Question. I do know that, like, our drummer, when he built a house in Franklin, the builder found out he was a musician and said, well, do you want me to soundproof any of these rooms for you? And they did. So like with his downstairs room, they put soundproof insulation in there for him so that he could have his drums set up and rehearse. So I haven't run into a lot of home studios during inspections. And honestly, most home studios in Nashville are not built out to be real studios. They're very just makeshift. And even in my house, I've got a studio in my front office that I use and work out of. I mean, I feel like, the average casual fan would be shocked at how music is being made these days.
Yeah.
Whether it's remotely or, when I'm producing. It's very rare that we're all in the same room together making music. And so the technology has improved to a point where the rooms don't have to be as perfect.
Do you follow Nick D at all?
Possibly. I don't know.
Yeah, it's Nick Donovan is his name, but his musician-wise, he goes by Nick D.
Yeah.
He's an independent musician out of Culpeper, Virginia.
Okay.
Which it's a small podunk nowheresville in Virginia. Beautiful little town, but it is small.
Yeah.
And he started something called Independent Media, I think. But it's all about how musicians that want to start putting their music out there can use modern tools, kind of like what you're talking about, to do this. And he's built a multi-million follower fan base on social media.
Very cool.
Just with his own in-house production stuff.
Well, it's much like inspection software.
Sure.
Like in the 90s, the inspections I got were always on carbon copy with maybe a couple of pictures in there. And I was not knowing much about inspection software. When I looked to see what was happening now, I was like, this is so cool. I was like, this is what I always dreamed it could be. And so that technology side of home inspection is crazy. Never thought you'd have to take 500 pictures at an inspection.
Yeah.
You have to cover everything now. It's very detailed. But it's cool to see how software is pushing the boundaries with all that stuff is really cool.
Yeah, and that's actually an awesome place to say that today's show is sponsored by ISN, Inspection Support Network. And if you don't have a preferred inspection software that you're using right now, you can use this to manage your entire office. Everything from email campaigns, texting campaigns for marketing, your schedule. We've got a report writer on there now, and you can get a 30-day free trial if you go to inspectionsupportnetwork.com and try it. So Jeff, wait, which do you use, man?
I'm gonna drop the S word.
Censor that out.
Did I get bleeped out?
Yeah, you're getting bleeped out, man. So it's the one time that you're gonna see a Christian musician get bleeped out on a podcast. So, dude, okay, we'll convert you, man, in the name of Jesus.
Amen.
Okay,
Amen.
We'll bring you over.
We'll work on that.
But anyway, so no, I mean, software is phenomenal. That was one of the things that we actually talking about at the Nachi conference. You were asking about that earlier off air. But one of the things that I was talking with another guy about was just some of the ideas that he had for AI and statistic usage, things like this, where just, when you get these collaborative minds together, what could we be doing to help advance things as an industry? Amazing conversations.
There's no doubt that AI is going to play a big part of inspection software in the future. I mean, I've dabbled with ChatGPT a little bit for narratives, and some of the stuff you get back is pretty impressive. I mean, I would never rely on it solely, but in some of the research, even if I'm stumped, I'll just about something or want to know more about it. But you can see how those integrations are going to happen in real time with software coming up in the future. And it's going to be pretty crazy.
That'd be cool, man. Yeah, no, I'm excited to see it for sure. Let's do this before we wrap it up. I want to do a top 3 things. Actually, let's do top 5. Let's do a top 5 things that home inspector should look for in an old house. Since you've renovated a couple, you inspect them all over Nashville. Give me a top 5 for what inspectors should look for when they're inspecting vintage homes.
Well, I mean, foundation stuff is usually what most people are concerned about when it comes to an old house, because the first thing you do in Tennessee when you walk into an old house is you realize how slanted every floor is and how crooked everything is. And I mean, a lot of these houses were built by just normal people, that just built them out of whatever they could find. And in my 40s place, the the joists were being held up by tree stumps, like literal tree stumps that were just aged. I've had, bathroom studs that were fossilized that needed diamond tip drills to, look in. So yeah, I mean, number one, most clients want to know, is this place falling down?
Yeah.
That's their biggest question. And sometimes in Nashville they are.
Yeah.
So really digging under there. A lot of houses end up getting foundation work, to kind of shore up some things. You do get a lot of rot, a lot of stuff that needs to be replaced. So what are we talking about? Top 5 things?
Top 5, yeah. So foundation was one.
Yeah, I mean, obviously it depends on what the window situation is. I know in the place I lived in, it was original single pane windows. Not one of them opened. They've got the old sashes and.
I kind of like some of those though. Like they're cool if they still work and they've been preserved properly.
Cold in the winter though. I mean, they do not do anything.
No.
And then fireplaces and chimneys are a big one. Because a lot, like the old house I had like 4 chimneys, so that's 4 potential for leakage.
That's a lot of draft.
A lot of drafts, a lot of some. I mean, I've seen some where people are burning wood fires where they shouldn't be, because there's a fireplace there, but really that fireplace was there because they had an old stove connected.
Right.
And somebody will just move in and think that they can just put wood in the opening, and that's an actual fireplace.
No.
I've seen that a few times. So kind of digging through that to see what's going on with the chimneys, and even if I'm not that we're chimney inspectors, but just making sure that the client's not going to do something crazy when they move in. And then safety things. I mean, you see a lot of safety stuff with electrical. Like I said, we had to rewire one of my houses because of knob and tube, and even had some old outlets that I thought weren't being used, that were knob and tube, that were off, that were still on. That gave me a bit of a surprise. That I had no idea. So, and then I mean, I guess we're going through all the major. The old home stuff, electrical, a lot of stuff is just do it yourself, add on this here, add on this there.
Right.
Fuses, do you have how modern is everything, that kind of thing. That's a big one. And then plumbing is a big one too, because, and I've been victimized by galvanized,
totally flaking out.
Flaking out. I've had main sewer lines crack. So, I mean, definitely a lot more involved with an old house.
Sure,
But
especially the DIY stuff. I mean, in DC and Northern Virginia, I would see a lot of ABS to PVC that wasn't permitted, but people found it at the hardware store and they're like, it looks the same, it's just different color, And they end up slapping it together with the wrong cement and. Yeah,
but it's funny, and we talk about older houses. I spent a week in London about a month ago, and driving through
just
there,
casually inspecting in London.
No, well, you're inspector.
You're looking around,
You're constantly looking at everything, and I'm like, you think houses are old in Tennessee? I mean, we're talking. This is there's just chimneys protruding everywhere. I'm this is a nightmare. That would keep you. You would be busy for months straight over here.
The report on this already is 100
There's no
pages.
way you could. You wouldn't have enough pages.
No, definitely not.
So I mean, like you said, it's having to communicate, because a lot of times you have young buyers buying old houses because they're so excited about the charm part of it and trying to explain it. And I was one of them. I was just like, oh, honey, we're gonna move into this old place.
We need some bistro lights here.
So just being realistic about that, but the cool thing about old houses too, I'm like, no matter how bad it gets, I'm like, well, if it's been here for 150 years or 200 years, it's probably not still going to be here in another 50 years. There's
exactly.
always that too. So
yeah. And so when you start to see that little slope in the floor where they're like, so how much is this going to cost to fix? You go, it's just charm at this point.
Exactly.
Yeah. Now there's some inspectors that'll dog on me for that one, but but seriously, at some point it's, like you said, it's been there. That part of the room has been crooked for longer than you've been alive. So Is it going to go anywhere? Yes, you can fix it. Is it going to cost a whole lot more than you probably want to pay after the current market that we're in?
Yeah.
So
Totally. Yeah.
No, it makes sense, man. So, well, Jeff, this has been awesome. You got a gig to do, dude. I'm looking forward to seeing you guys rock it.
Yeah.
I'm totally going to inspect your drummer's drum stand because this thing, like, it rises up, it tips, it like spins around.
Let's go do it.
I got to make sure he doesn't die on that thing.
Yeah,
Okay.
I might need you to inspect the tour bus too.
Dude, yeah. I was going to say, I've got an Airstream, man, and that thing is loaded out by comparison. So
Awesome.
that's awesome, man.
Let's
Well,
go
thanks
do
so
it.
much for the time.
Yeah, man.
Let's go have
Thank
some
you so
fun.
much.
Yep.
Appreciate it.
And thank you guys so much for watching. Go follow him. First of all, drop your social medias on there, man. You need some followers on your home inspection page.
Yeah, so on Instagram, you can find me at Southern Grove Home Inspections. If you want to follow the music part of things, you can just look up Jeff Frankenstein and you can find me there. Or
Is it Frankenstein or Frankenstein?
it's Frankenstein.
It is,
and
okay.
here we are right before Halloween. Always a tough time of the year for my family. Yeah.
I'm sorry for that. Yeah. That's the only joke I was going to do with the young Frankenstein.
Man, we have fun with it. It's cool. Yeah.
Got to. That's awesome. So, well, but go give them a follow, seriously. If you're a realtor, because I've got some friends up there that are realtors too, give this guy some business. But anyway, thank you guys so much for watching. You can follow the show, obviously, online. You can listen wherever you get your podcasts. But I will be right back here, back and better than ever next time on the Wraparound by Order.
Let's do it.
Cut.